Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Spurs Up. I'm Jack Taylor.
And I'm Matt Bumbaca.
And our guest this week is Bobby Bones Bryant. He played for South Carolina way back in the day. I won't tell you how old he is, but he was the 1967 ACC Player of the Year, so if that tells you anything. He was also a multi-sport athlete. He pitched for the Gamecocks, the first pitcher to have 100 strikeouts in a single season. And he played for the Vikings for 14 years after that, even though he was being talked to by the Yankees and the Red Sox trying to get him on. Bobby, thank you for coming on with us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, as we talked about, you're a multi-sport athlete. You played baseball and football. What led you to choose football over baseball?
Well, when I was in elementary school, I played 3 sports. We had 3 sports, and I started in the 4th grade. When I was 10 years old, I started playing football, basketball, and baseball in elementary school. Now, today they don't have those programs in the elementary schools. They have a lot of youth programs where kids that young are playing sports. But that's when I got into playing all the different sports. And then in high school, I added track to that. So I ran track, played football, baseball, basketball, and so it was just natural to play 2 sports. When I got to South Carolina, and I played the 2 that I liked the best, football and baseball. Coach Baskett wanted me he was a head track coach, he wanted me to run track, but I saw how much they ran out there, and I told him I really didn't want to run track, so he was gracious enough not to coerce me to play, that is. So.
That's great. Coming from down south and going up to Minnesota, what would you say was the best part of being a part of that Purple People Eaters defense?
The best part was I was a defensive back. And the front 4, Alan Page, Gary Larson, Carl Eller, and Jim Marshall were one of the best front 4s in football history. And certainly at that time, they were outstanding. And Alan Page and I were drafted in that same year, 1967. And Alan was the key piece to that front 4 that made them the Purple People Eaters. They were good before that, but he just completed the effectiveness of the pass rush that they had. And we as defensive backs on that team knew that if we could cover our man or play zone, we played a lot of zone because you can play a zone for 3 or 4 seconds and the guy's not too many people are gonna run past you. We knew if we could cover the receivers for 3 or 4 seconds that was good enough because the pass rush was going to get to the quarterback. And once in a while we were beaten deep, but not too often.
Now you are second in Viking history with 51 career interceptions. And which would you say is one of your favorite interceptions or one of your more favorite moments as a Viking?
Well, one of our major opponents was the Dallas Cowboys, and I remember when I was at the University of South Carolina, Dallas was talking to me and sending me letters like I was going to be drafted in the 1st round. Well, I found out they send every player that kind of letter, you know. But anyway, I wasn't drafted by Dallas, so when we played them, I had a little extra incentive to do well.
A little chip on your shoulder?
Yes, yeah, a little chip on my shoulder. But Roger Staubach was a quarterback, and this was 1973 NFC Championship game in Dallas, and I was covering the fastest man in the world, and that was Bob Hayes. Mm-hmm. And the first time Staubach tried to throw to Hayes, I intercepted it and ran it 63 yards for a touchdown, and then intercepted another pass later on in that game. So that was especially satisfying for me.
And that led you to 1 out of the 4 Super Bowl appearances that you got to play in, or 2 you were injured for, but you got to be there on the team for 4 of them.
That's
what
correct.
is it like just getting to be in a Super Bowl?
Well, it's exciting. I mean, it's back then it wasn't quite the spectacle that it is today, and today the hype is so great, and the players are making so much money, and I think 30-second commercial this year for the Super Bowl was like $6 million. So, but it's just hyped a lot more today, and so therefore it seems like it's a bigger event. But it was pretty big back then. That was what everybody wanted to. That's where they wanted to end up at the end of the season, in the Super Bowl. So.
Now, coming back to college, what would you say was your favorite memory as a Gamecock?
Well, I had a couple of good memories. I ran a punt back 98 yards for a touchdown against NC State my senior year, and that was the only game we won that year, so we were 1-9.
But that was the first game that they played at Carter Finley Stadium. That was their opening game.
That was their inaugural game.
I'm pretty sure that's still a Gamecock record, 98 yards.
I think it is, because it was a mistake then, and it would be a big mistake now if anybody beat it. You have to run it 99 or 100 yards. But most punt returners are taught to not catch the ball inside the 10. Now I know they catch it now. They'll fair catch it on the 5-yard line, but that's better than getting it on the 2-yard line, because the cover teams are so well coached now that they'll get somebody on the goal line and try to catch the ball if the punt returner doesn't fair catch it.
So most players, when they're in college and or through high school and they dream of getting drafted, they just pray they can get drafted by any team. But you got drafted by 3 different teams in 2 different sports. Yeah. Talk about how much that had an impact on your life.
Well, my junior year, I was drafted by the New York Yankees, and I think you said you were a big Yankee fan.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, and I was too, but they offered me $50 a week in a paper route. I didn't think that was much of a bonus. So I'm only kidding about that. But I didn't think I was good enough to go right to the major leagues, and I knew some guys that had been in the minor leagues for years and years, and they talked about riding buses all over the 2 or 3 state area to play games, and I knew if I got drafted in football, I would go to camp with the major league team and either make it or not make it. And if I had not made it in football, I think I probably could have gone back and tried baseball. But I got lucky and played 14 years with the Vikings. So.
At your biggest in the NFL, you were about 6'1", 175. Do you think in today's era, if you had played, now against the talent that there is in the NFL, do you think you would have had a chance?
Well, if my body was like it was when I played in the NFL, probably not. But if I'd played in a system where today, if you're playing in high school today, they have those guys on weight training programs so that they're strong. They've got lots of muscle. They gain weight. So I might have been able to get to 180 pounds. That was my goal in the pros, and I never made it. But they train so hard, and then in the pros they're training with weights too. But covering receivers that are 6'2", 200, some of them 220 pounds, and run as fast as the little guys can, it would have been very hard for me to play today. So I don't hold any thoughts that I really could have realistically played today with the size of the receivers. So.
Yeah. Now, Bobby, how much would you say the game has changed from when you played to now, and where do you think the Gamecock program is headed in the future?
Well, today teams are passing so much more, and because of TV and of the fans wanting to see action and see scoring, they allow offensive linemen to hold. They allow receivers to hold the defensive backs. And I look at some of the plays of the Gamecocks and other college games where the wide receivers are big and strong, and they allowed to hold the defensive backs if they can get their hands inside their numbers, and they can grab a handful of jersey, and they can hold on, and guys are so strong that the defensive backs cannot get away from them. And that's why sometimes it looks like they're not even trying to get away. They're trying to, but they just can't. So, but that's the thing about playing today, and I think that's true in the pros too. They allow a lot more holding than they did in the past. But it's because they know that if you got a game that's going to be 3-0 or 6-3 or 10-7, that fans are not going to be that interested in it. I mean, just like that's been the hardest reason soccer has had such a hard time catching on in this country, is because most of the games are low scoring, and people in this country, they want to see a soccer game 10-9. They don't want to see one 1-0, and it's the same in football.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today. Again, Mr. Bryant, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of our show. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And until next time, South Carolina,
Spurs up.